Blood means nothing when there's been too much of it spilled between you. That's what my sister Diana told me the last time we spoke, 3 years ago on that rain-soaked Tuesday when I begged her to let me explain. Now I was standing outside St. Catherine's Church, my hand trembling on the heavy wooden door, watching guests in pastel dresses and pressed suits filter past me with curious glances. I wasn't supposed to be here. My name wasn't on any seating chart or guest list. The cream-colored invitation that should have arrived in my mailbox 6 months ago never came. I'm Eliza Morgan, 34, from Boston, Massachusetts, and today my only sister is getting married to a man I've never met. The man she chose after leaving everything and everyone from her past life behind. The morning had started with a text from my mother. Diana's wedding is at 2 p.m. St. Catherine's. She doesn't know I'm telling you this. Don't make me regret it. That was it. No follow-up, no details, just an address and a thinly veiled warning. Mom had been walking the tightrope between us for years, too afraid of losing Diana completely to take a side, too haunted by what happened to cut me off entirely. The church bells rang, announcing it was 1:30 p.m. Guests were still arriving, laughing and taking photos on the stone steps. I smoothed down my navy blue dress, the only nice thing I could find in my closet on such short notice, and tried to calm my breathing. 3 years of therapy, of rebuilding my life piece by jagged piece, and here I was, about to potentially undo it all. "You must be Diana's sister," came a gentle voice behind me. I turned to find an older man in clerical attire, kind eyes crinkling at the corners as he studied my face. "The resemblance is remarkable." My throat tightened. Father Thomas," he said, extending his hand. "I'm performing the ceremony today." I took his hand, noticing how warm it felt against my ice-cold fingers. "I'm Elisa, but I think there's been a mistake. I wasn't actually invited." Something flashed across his face, surprise, then understanding, then something else I couldn't quite place. "Walk with me a moment," he said, guiding me away from the church entrance toward a small garden to the side. The June air was thick, with the scent of roses and anticipation. "Diana spoke of you during our premarital counseling sessions," Father Thomas said as we stopped beside a stone bench. My heart skipped. "She did," he nodded. "Not extensively, but enough for me to understand there's pain there. Deep pain." I looked down at my hands, at the small crescent-shaped scars on my palms from that night, from gripping the steering wheel so hard when I got the call. "Father, I don't want to cause a scene. Maybe I shouldn't have come. Yet, here you are," he said simply. "After all this time? That must mean something." The church bells rang again. 30 minutes until the ceremony. Father Thomas seemed to be considering something. "Eliza, would you allow me to ask you a question?" I nodded. "If you could say something to your sister today, what would it be?" The question hit me like a physical blow. What would I say? I'd rehearsed 1,000 speeches in my head over the years, ranging from bitter accusations to desperate apologies. But standing here, minutes from seeing her again, none of those prepared words felt right. I would tell her, ... My voice broke. I steadied myself. I would tell her that not a day has gone by that I haven't thought about her, that I understand why she cut me off, but that I miss my sister. That I'm sorry I couldn't save him, too. Father Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Come with me." He led me through a side door into the church, through a narrow hallway, and into a small antechamber. "Wait here," he said. "The ceremony begins soon. I have something in mind, but I need to check with someone first." Before I could ask what he meant, he was gone, leaving me alone with the distant sounds of an organ beginning to play, and my heart threatening to beat out of my chest. 10 minutes later, the door opened again. It wasn't Father Thomas, it was my mother. Elegant, in pale blue, her face a storm of emotions. "Eliza!" she breathed. "You came." "Ma?" I said, rising to my feet. "I'm sorry, I know I probably shouldn't be here, but..." She crossed the room and pulled me into a tight embrace, something she hadn't done in years. "No," she whispered against my hair, "maybe you should be." When she pulled back, I saw tears in her eyes. "Father Thomas spoke to Richard, Diana's fiancé. He wants to meet you before the ceremony." "What? Why would he?" "Because," came a deep voice from the doorway, I've spent 3 years loving a woman who flinches every time someone mentions her sister's name. The man standing there was tall, with kind eyes and a serious expression. He wore a perfectly tailored tuxedo and a look of cautious curiosity. "Richard Harmon," he said, extending his hand. "You must be Eliza." I shook his hand, speechless. "Diana doesn't know you're here," he said. "And I don't know what happened between you two. She never talks about it, except sometimes in her sleep." My heart clenched, but I know that whatever it was changed her. There's a part of her that's always guarded, always grieving. He paused. Father Thomas suggested something, and I agree with him. "But it has to be your choice." "What are you talking about?" I asked. "Diana thinks I asked my cousin to give a reading during the ceremony, but Father Thomas has a different idea. He wants you to speak instead." The room seemed to spin. "You want me to speak? At her wedding?" "She'll walk out." Richard shook his head. "I don't think she will, and if this has even a chance of healing whatever broke between you two, isn't it worth trying?" My mother squeezed my hand. "Eliza, maybe this is why I felt compelled to text you this morning. Maybe this is your chance." The organ music swelled from the main chapel. Time was running out.
What would I even say?
I whispered. Richard smiled for the first time. Father Thomas suggested a specific reading, something about love being patient and kind. Kordinchinsk, the wedding standard. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Will you do it?" he asked. I looked between them, this stranger who loved my sister enough to risk her anger on her wedding day, and my mother who had finally chosen a side after all these years. "Yes," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "I'll do it." The next 20 minutes passed in a blur. I was led to a seat in the back of the church, my hands clutching the folded paper Father Thomas had given me with the reading. Guests filled the pews. The music shifted, and the ceremony began. Richard took his place at the altar. The bridesmaids processed in, none of whom I recognized. And then the music changed, and everyone stood, and there she was. Diana. My breath caught in my throat. She was radiant in ivory lace, her dark hair swept up, our grandmother's pearls at her throat. She looked happier than I'd seen her in years, and for a moment I was seized with doubt. Who was I to intrude on this day? But then she passed my pew, and for just a second, her eyes caught mine. She faltered the tiniest hesitation in her step before continuing down the aisle, her expression carefully controlled again. She'd seen me. She knew I was here. Father Thomas began the ceremony with warm words about love and commitment. I barely heard them, my pulse thundering in my ears. Diana stood facing Richard, her back to the congregation, to me. And then came the moment. "Before we proceed with the vows," Father Thomas said, "Richard and Diana have chosen a special reading. I've asked someone close to the bride's heart to share these words." Diana turned slightly, confusion evident in her profile as she looked at Richard. He gave her a gentle smile and a nearly imperceptible nod. "Eliza Morgan," Father Thomas called, "would you please come forward?" A collective murmur swept through the church. I rose on shaking legs, feeling every eye on me as I walked toward the altar. But I only saw Diana, who had turned fully now, her face a canvas of shock, anger, and something else, something fragile and unnameable. As I took my place at the lectern, our eyes locked for the first time in 3 years. The paper trembled in my hands. The reading Father Thomas had given me suddenly felt hollow, insufficient. In that moment, I made a decision that would either heal us or break us completely. I set the paper aside. "Diana," I said, my voice carrying through the hushed church, "I wasn't invited today, but I'm your sister, and there are things I need to say." The silence in the church was deafening. Diana's face had gone pale, her knuckles white as she gripped her bouquet. Richard placed a steadying hand on her lower back, but his eyes were on me, encouraging yet wary. 3 years, 4 months, and 16 days, I continued, my voice echoing slightly in the vaulted space. "That's how long it's been since you looked me in the eye. Since you told me you never wanted to see me again." A few uncomfortable coughs came from the congregation. From the corner of my eye, I could see my mother's face, tight with anxiety, but I couldn't stop now. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Eliza, Diana's older sister. The sister she used to call in the middle of the night when she couldn't sleep. The sister who taught her how to drive, how to apply eyeliner, how to tell when a man was worth her time. My voice soft. The sister who failed her when it mattered most. Diana's breathing had quickened, her chest rising and falling rapidly beneath the delicate lace of her gown. I could see the storm brewing behind her eyes, the same storm I'd faced in the mirror every day since that night. I'm not here to ruin your wedding, Diana. I'm here because despite everything, you're still my sister, and I never got to tell you how sorry I am. The weight of unspoken words hung between us, 3 years of silence condensed into this fragile moment. I gripped the edges of the lectern to steady myself, feeling the smooth wood beneath my fingers as a tangible anchor to reality. The night Jason died. Don't. Diana's voice cut through the church, sharp and strained. Don't you dare say his name. It was the first word she'd spoken to me in over 3 years, and it landed like a physical blow. Richard whispered something in her ear, but she shook her head, eyes never leaving mine. Diana, please, I said, softer now. I know today is your day. I know I have no right to be here, but I've carried this for so long, and I carried it. Her voice was incredulous. You've carried it. My twin brother is dead because of you, and you think you've been carrying something. A collective gasp rippled through the church. Father Thomas stepped forward, perhaps to intervene, but Diana was already moving, stepping away from Richard, closer to me. You were supposed to drive him home, she said, each word precise and cutting. You promised me you would drive him home from that party. The familiar guilt washed over me, cold and relentless. I know, but you left early. You left him there. Diana, Reacher said gently, reaching for her arm. She shook him off. You left him there, she repeated, louder now, and he got into Mark's car instead. Mark, who had been drinking all night. I closed my eyes briefly, the memories washing over me. The text from Jason. Don't worry, got another ride. See you tomorrow. The relief I'd felt, able to go home early with a migraine starting to pound behind my eyes. The phone call at 2:37 a.m., that changed everything. I didn't know Mark was drunk, I said. The same words I'd said 1,000 times before. Jason told me he had another ride. I thought, you didn't think... Diana's voice broke. You were supposed to be responsible. You were supposed to look out for him. That's what you always promised. The church was utterly silent now, 200 guests bearing witness to our raw, exposed grief. I became acutely aware of the inappropriateness of this moment, my sister in her wedding gown, confronting me about our shared tragedy in front of everyone she knew. You're right, I said, the words scraping my throat. I failed him. I failed. And not a day goes by that I don't hate myself for it. Something shifted in Diana's expression, then surprise, perhaps, at my admission. I had always defended myself before, insisted it wasn't my fault, that I couldn't have known. But 3 years of therapy had taught me that while I couldn't change what happened, I could acknowledge the pain my choices had caused. I was the last one to text him, I continued, quieter now. The last one to communicate with him alive. He told me he had another ride, and I said, okay, see you tomorrow. That was it. My last words to our brother were, see you tomorrow. Tears slid down my cheeks, but I made no move to wipe them away. Tomorrow that never came. Diana's eyes glistened, but her posture remained rigid, defensive. Why are you here, Eliza? Really? I took a deep breath. Because I miss my sister. Because despite everything, I love you. Because I've spent 3 years trying to figure out how to live with what happened, and I'm still not sure I know how. I glanced at the paper I'd set aside, Father Thomas's chosen reading about love, being patient and kind. It seemed almost absurd now. I'm not asking for forgiveness, I said, looking back at Diana. I know I don't deserve that. But I am asking you to know that not a single day passes that I don't think of Jason. That I don't wish it had been me in that car instead. Diana flinched. I carry his wallet, I said, my voice dropping to nearly a whisper. Did you know that? The police gave it to me at the hospital that night. It still has his student ID, his coffee punch card, that awful picture of us from Coney Island when we were kids. I swallowed hard. I carry it everywhere, so I never forget. So he's always with me, In some small way. Diana's composure began to crack, tears spilling over and tracking down her carefully made-up face. Richard moved to stand beside her, his arm encircling her waist, supporting her. "I didn't come to ruin your wedding," I said again. "I came because I couldn't bear the thought of not seeing you become a bride, of missing another milestone, of the distance between us growing even wider." I paused, gathering the last of my courage. Jason would have hated what happened to us. He would have hated seeing his twin and his big sister torn apart like this. At the mention of her childhood nickname, Diana covered her mouth with her hand, a small, strangled sound escaping her. For a moment, the strong, composed woman disappeared, and I caught a glimpse of my little sister, the girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, who laughed until she snorted, who looked up to me in a way I never deserved. "I should go," I said, finally stepping away from the lectern. "I'm sorry for interrupting your ceremony. Congratulations to you both." I turned to leave, my legs surprisingly steady as I walked down the 3 steps from the altar. The aisle stretched before me, impossibly long, lined with stunned faces I didn't recognize. My mother half rose from her seat as I passed, but I shook my head slightly. This wasn't her burden to bear. I was halfway down the aisle when I heard it. "Wait," Diana's voice, softer now, but clear in the silent church. I stopped, unable to turn around, afraid of what I might see. "Eliza, wait." Slowly, I turned. Diana stood at the top of the aisle, her wedding dress catching the colored light from the stained glass windows. Richard stood a few steps behind her, concern etched on his face. "You're wrong," she said, her voice carrying across the space between us. "Jason wouldn't have hated what happened to us. He would have understood it." She took a shaky breath. "But he also would have wanted us to find our way back to each other eventually." Hope, dangerous and fragile, flickered in my chest. "I'm not ready to forgive you," she continued. "I don't know if I'll ever be fully ready. But," she glanced back at Richard, who nodded encouragingly, "but this is my wedding day. And despite everything, you're still my sister." She hesitated, then said the last words I expected to hear. "Stay. Please stay for the ceremony." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak, and moved to an empty seat in the back row. Diana returned to the altar, to Richard, to the future she was building. Father Thomas, who had been watching the entire exchange with solemn understanding, stepped forward once more. "Love," he began, his voice steady and warm, "is patient. Love is kind. But love is also messy and complicated. It breaks and mends and breaks again. True love, whether between spouses, siblings, or friends, that requires tremendous courage." He looked between Diana and Richard, then briefly at me. "Today we witness not only the union of 2 souls in marriage, but perhaps the first fragile steps toward healing another kind of bond." As the ceremony continued, I sat perfectly still, afraid to move, to breathe, to do anything that might shatter this tenuous moment. Diana and Richard exchanged vows, their voices clear and sure. They slipped rings onto each other's fingers, promises made tangible. And when Father Thomas pronounced them husband and wife, the church erupted in applause that seemed to wash away some of the tension that had filled the space minutes before. I watched my sister kiss her new husband, a smile breaking across her face that reached all the way to her eyes. In that moment she looked so much like Jason, it made my heart ache. The same dimple, the same tilt of the head when truly happy. Our brother, present in her every feature, living on in the twin he left behind. As the newlyweds processed back down the aisle, Diana's eyes found mine briefly. No smile, no nod, nothing to suggest forgiveness or reconciliation. But she had asked me to stay. After 3 years of silence, it was more than I'd dared to hope for. It was a beginning. The reception was held at the Harmon family estate, a sprawling property, with manicured gardens and a white tent glowing with string lights against the darkening evening sky. I lingered at the periphery, nursing a glass of champagne I hadn't tasted, watching Diana and Richard move through their first dance with practiced ease. They looked perfect together, her dark hair against his fair features, her graceful movements complementing his steadier ones. I hadn't expected an invitation to the reception, but Mother had insisted I come, her hand firm on my elbow as we left the church. "She asked you to stay," she'd said, as if that settled everything. But stay for the ceremony didn't necessarily extend to join us for dinner and dancing afterward. Still, I couldn't bring myself to leave, not when this fragile thread of possibility hung between my sister and me. "You're lurking," came a voice beside me. I turned to find Richard's mother, Patricia Harmon, identifiable by her corsage and the same kind eyes as her son. "Diana's sister? Yes? The one from the church?" I flushed. "Yes. I'm Eliza Morgan, Patricia Harmon," she confirmed, extending a manicured hand. "That was quite an entrance you made." "I'm sorry about that," I said automatically. "It wasn't my intention to disrupt the ceremony." She studied me, head tilted slightly. "Sometimes disruption is necessary. My late husband used to say that the most important conversations are rarely comfortable ones." Across the tent, Diana laughed at something one of her bridesmaids said, her head thrown back in unguarded joy. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen her laugh like that. "She's happy," I said softly. "Richard seems like a good man." "The best," Patricia agreed, "though I'm his mother, so I'm rather biased." She sipped her champagne. "He told me, about the accident." "About your brother?" I stiffened. "He did," she nodded. "Richard doesn't enter into anything lightly. When he and Diana became serious, he wanted to understand what shaped her, what hurt her." Her gaze was direct, unflinching. "Grief changes people. It certainly changed my son when his father died." "I'm sorry for your loss," I said automatically. "Thank you. It was cancer 6 years ago." She turned to watch her son, now dancing with an elderly woman I assumed was his grandmother. Richard blamed himself for a long time, thought if he'd noticed the symptoms sooner, insisted on more tests. She shook her head. "Guilt is a powerful poison." I swallowed hard. "Yes, it is. Diana carries it too, not just anger at you, but guilt of her own." This surprised me. "What does Diana have to feel guilty about? She wasn't even there that night." Patricia turned back to me. "Exactly. She wasn't there. From what Richard has told me, your brother Jason, he wanted her to come to that party, but she had an early exam the next day and stayed home to study." She raised an eyebrow. She wonders what might have changed if she'd gone, if she might have been the one to drive him home instead. I had never considered this perspective. Diana, feeling guilty, the thought was disorienting. "The past is immutable," Patricia continued. "What matters is what we choose to do with the time we have left." She touched my arm lightly. "Don't waste it on the periphery, dear." With that, she moved away, joining a group of guests near the cake table. I remained where I was, her words echoing in my mind. The evening progressed. Dinner was served. Toasts were made. I picked at my food, hyper-aware of my status as the uninvited guest, the family scandal personified. A few curious looks came my way, but most guests were too caught up in the celebration to pay me much attention. It was nearly 10 o'clock when Diana appeared beside my table, alone. "Hey," she said, the single syllable awkward between us. I looked up at her, still radiant in her wedding gown, though she'd removed her veil some time after the ceremony. "Hey," she hesitated, then sat in the empty chair beside me. "You're still here. I can leave if you want," I offered immediately. "No, that's not." She stopped, frustrated. "This is harder than I thought it would be." I waited, giving her space to find her words. "Why now, Eliza?" she finally asked. "After all this time, why show up today of all days?" It was a fair question. "Mom texted me this morning. Told me where the ceremony was." Diana's eyebrows rose. "Mom did." I nodded. "Just the location and time. Nothing else." She looked across the tent to where our mother sat with Richard's aunt, the two women deep in conversation. "Interesting. I didn't plan to speak," I added. "That was Father Thomas's idea." "And Richard's?" I figured as much. "Richard has a persistent belief in reconciliation." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "It's one of his more annoying qualities." The almost joke hung between us, neither of us quite sure how to proceed. "He seems wonderful," I offered. "You look happy with him." "I am." She twisted her new wedding ring, the diamond catching the light. "He's steady, patient. He doesn't push me to be okay when I'm not, like after Jason's death. went the unspoken addition, when everyone expected Diana to move on after an appropriate mourning period. When people stopped mentioning Jason's name around her, as if silence could erase the loss. I'm glad, I said, and meant it. You deserve that kind of love. Diana looked at me directly then, her gaze searching my face. Did you mean what you said about carrying Jason's wallet? I nodded, reaching for my clutch purse. I opened it and carefully removed the worn leather wallet, setting it on the table between us. Diana stared at it, her breath catching. May I? She whispered. Of course. With trembling fingers, she picked it up, opening it to reveal Jason's driver's license, his smiling face preserved behind plastic. She traced the edge of the photo. He looked so young. He was young, I said softly. We all were. She continued examining the wallet's contents, the faded movie ticket stubs Jason had saved, his college ID, the folded slip of paper with our parents' address and phone number, Mom's insistence in case he ever lost his phone. And there, tucked in the back pocket, the photo from Coney Island I'd mentioned, the three of us, sunburned and sticky with cotton candy, Jason in the middle with his arms around both his sisters. I forgot about this picture, Diana said, carefully removing it. Look at your hair. God, what were you thinking? Hey, crimped hair was very cool in 2006. I protested automatically, then caught myself. Were we really doing this? Making small talk, almost like before? Diana's smile faded as she returned the photo to its place. I heard you, in the church when you said you wish it had been you instead. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. I used to wish that too, she admitted, her voice barely audible over the music and laughter surrounding us. In those first few months after, I was so angry, so broken. I wanted someone to blame. And you were the easiest target. The confession hit me like a physical blow, even though it wasn't anything I hadn't already known. But the thing is, she continued, closing the wallet and returning it to the table, if it had been you in that car, instead of Jason, I would have lost you both that night. My eyes burned with unshed tears. Diana, ... I'm not saying I forgive you, she said quickly. I'm not saying everything is fixed. But ... she took a deep breath. But Richard asked me something last night that I couldn't stop thinking about. He asked if I thought Jason would be happy with the way I've handled his death, with cutting you out completely. And I barely dared to breathe. And I knew the answer was no. Jason adored you. He wouldn't have wanted this. This complete severing. A tear slipped down my cheek. I wiped it away quickly. I'm not ready for heart-to-hearts, or sister spa days, Diana clarified. But maybe, ... maybe we can try small steps, a text sometimes, a coffee in a few months, when the dust settles. It was more than I'd hoped for, more than I deserved. I'd like that. She nodded, then stood. I should get back. Richard's grandmother wants to teach us some Italian dance from her village. Go, I said. It's your wedding day. She hesitated, then reached out and squeezed my hand briefly, the first physical contact between us in over 3 years. Goodbye, Eliza. Goodbye, G. I watched her rejoin the crowd, immediately enveloped by well-wishers and relatives. My sister? Still my sister, despite everything. I gathered my things, including Jason's wallet, and slipped quietly toward the exit. I'd overstayed my welcome, pushed my luck far enough for one day. But as I reached the edge of the tent, I felt a hand on my arm. Leaving so soon? Father Thomas asked. He'd changed from his formal robes into a simple black suit with a clerical collar. I think it's best, I said. It's been an eventful day. He nodded thoughtfully. Indeed it has. Walk with me a moment. I followed him away from the reception tent, down a winding garden path, lit by small solar lamps. The sounds of the celebration faded behind us, replaced by chirping crickets and the soft rustle of leaves. I hope you don't think I manipulated you earlier, he said after a moment, asking you to speak like that. I shook my head. No. I think maybe it needed to happen. Though I'm not sure a wedding was the ideal venue. He chuckled softly. Perhaps not. but timing rarely cooperates with our plans. He stopped at a small stone bench and gestured for me to sit. I lost my brother to, car accident, like yours. I was driving. The simple statement hung in the night air. I stared at him. This stranger, who suddenly wasn't a stranger at all. What happened? I asked. Black Ice Rural Road in Minnesota. I was 17, Tommy was 15. His voice was steady, matter of fact. The car spun out, hit a tree. I walked away with a broken arm. Tommy didn't walk away at all. I'm so sorry, I whispered. He nodded, accepting the condolence. It was 43 years ago, this past March. More than twice as long as he was alive. How did you learn to live with it? Father Thomas considered the question. I didn't, for a long time. I dropped out of school, started drinking, pushed away my parents, my friends, anyone who tried to help. I was determined to punish myself. You see, I understood that impulse all too well. What changed? I asked. My mother dragged me to church one Sunday. I went just to shut her up, honestly. A small smile played at his lips. The sermon that day was about carrying burdens, about how we weren't meant to bear them alone. He looked up at the stars, barely visible through the light pollution of the city. I didn't have some dramatic conversion that day, but I did start thinking about Tommy differently, about what he would want for me. That's what Diana said, I murmured, about Jason, what he would want for us. Wise woman, your sister. Father Thomas nodded. It took me years to understand that honoring Tommy's memory meant living fully, not punishing myself eternally, that the best way to carry him with me was to live a life he would be proud of. The wisdom of his words settled around me like a warm blanket. Is that why you became a priest? Partly, he acknowledged, but mostly I became a priest because I wanted to help people find their way through the darkest woods, to be the person I needed when I was 17 and thought my life was over. We sat in companionable silence for a moment, the distant sounds of the reception washing over us. Today was a beginning, Eliza, he said finally. Just a beginning. There will be hard days ahead. Days when Diana retreats, when the grief resurfaces, when you both question if healing is even possible. I know, I said, and I did know. 3 years of therapy had taught me that grief wasn't linear, that healing wasn't a destination but a winding path with unexpected turns. But you showed up, he continued. That's more than half the battle sometimes. He stood, straightening his jacket. Keep showing up, Elisa, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. As I watched him walk back toward the reception, his words echoed in my mind. Keep showing up. It sounded so simple, yet I knew it would be anything but. Still, for the first time in 3 years, I felt something I'd almost forgotten. Hope. I took one last look at the celebration, at my sister dancing with her new husband, at my mother laughing with newfound family, at the life continuing despite the losses that had shaped it. Then I turned and walked toward the parking lot, Jason's wallet a comfortable weight in my purse. A brother still carried close to my heart even as I took my first steps toward a future where his absence wasn't the only thing defining me. 6 months after Diana's wedding, I stood outside Pavement Coffee House on Newbury Street, watching snowflakes settle on my coat sleeve. Boston in December was a postcard of twinkling lights and holiday decorations, the air crisp with winter's bite. Inside, students hunched over laptops, couples leaned across small tables, and baristas called out complicated drink orders with practiced efficiency. And somewhere in there was my sister, waiting for me. Our reconciliation had been slow, careful, built on text messages and voicemails that gradually increased in frequency and depth. A photo of her honeymoon in Greece. A brief call on what would have been Jason's birthday. An article about a new exhibit at the MFA that reminded her of my college thesis. Small moments, fragile connections, each one a tentative step across the chasm that had separated us for so long. Today was different. Today was our first face-to-face meeting since the wedding. A real conversation. Not just a moment stolen between ceremony and reception. Not just words exchanged in the heightened emotion of a milestone event. I checked my phone again. 3:54 p.m. I was early, of course. I'd left my apartment an hour before necessary, too anxious to sit still, and had circled the block 3 times before finally stopping outside the coffee shop. Diana had suggested this place-neutral territory. Not the family home where memories of Jason lingered in every corner, not my apartment that she'd never visited. At exactly 4 p.m., I saw her approach from the opposite direction, bundled in a camel coat, a red scarf bright against the gray December sky. She spotted me and raised her hand in a small wave. I waved back, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Hi," she said when she reached me, her breath visible in the cold air. "Hi," I echoed. "You look great." She did. There was a glow about her that hadn't been there before. Marriage suited her, it seemed. "Thanks," she gestured toward the door. "Should we go in? It's freezing out here." The warmth of the coffee shop enveloped us as we entered, along with the rich aroma of freshly ground beans and baked goods. We ordered a latte for her, black coffee for me, and found a small table by the window, away from the main crowd. For a moment, we just sat there, cradling our warm mugs, the awkwardness between us almost tangible. So, I started, desperate to break the silence. "How's married life?" Diana smiled, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "Good. Really good, actually. Richard and I are looking at houses in Cambridge." "That's wonderful," I said, genuinely pleased. "Staying in the area, then?" "His firm is here, and I like my job at the museum. Plus, ... She hesitated, then continued, "plus, Mom's here. And you." The simple acknowledgement that I factored into her decision even slightly warmed me more than the coffee. "How about you?" she asked. "Still at the publishing house?" "Actually, no." I took a sip of my coffee. "I left about 3 months ago. I'm doing freelance editing now, and I've started writing again." Her eyebrows rose. "Writing? Like your novel?" I nodded. Surprised, she remembered. Before Jason's death, I'd been working on a book, a coming-of-age story about siblings navigating loss. The irony wasn't lost on me, how life had cruelly mirrored my fiction. I'd abandoned the manuscript the night of the accident, unable to face the parallels. That's really great, Eliza." Her voice was soft, sincere. "You always were the storyteller of the family." The mention of family, our family, broken but still existing, hung between us. Diana traced the rim of her mug with her finger, a nervous habit she'd had since childhood. "I saw Father Thomas last week," she said suddenly. "He asked about you." "Oh, I hadn't spoken to the priest since the wedding. How is he?" "Good. He's retiring next year?" She met my eyes. "He said something that stuck with me, about how some people come into our lives for a season and others for a reason." I waited, sensing there was more. "I think he was both for us," she continued. "The right person at the right moment. If it had been any other priest performing my wedding, ... we might still not be speaking." I finished for her. She nodded. "Do you believe in that kind of thing? Divine intervention or fate or whatever you want to call it?" It was a loaded question, one that touched on beliefs we'd never fully discussed, even before the rift. The Morgan family approach to faith had always been private, individual. "I don't know," I answered honestly, "but I do think some moments are pivotal. Like crossroads, where everything after could go one way or another, depending on the choice you make." "Like when you decided to come to my wedding," Diana said. "Like when you asked me to stay?" I countered. A small smile touched her lips We sipped our coffees, the silence between us more comfortable now. "I've been seeing someone," Diana said abruptly. "A therapist, I mean." This surprised me. Diana had always been the stoic one, the one who internalized her feelings, who presented a composed face to the world even when crumbling inside. "That's good," I said carefully. "How is it going?" "Hard," she admitted. "Really hard. But necessary, I think." She looked down at her latte. "We talk about Jason a lot, and about you." My breath caught. "Me," she nodded. "About how I blamed you. How it was easier to direct all my anger at you than to face everything else." Everything else. Diana took a deep breath. The randomness of it. The fact that if I'd gone to that party like Jason wanted, maybe things would have been different. The guilt that I lived 22 years as his twin and never once considered how empty the world would feel without him. Tears welled in her eyes, and she blinked them back fiercely. And the hardest part, acknowledging that pushing you away didn't make the pain any less. It just meant I had to face it alone. I reached across the table tentatively, resting my hand near hers on invitation, not a demand. After a moment, she placed her hand on mine, our fingers intertwining. I missed you, I whispered, my own vision blurring. Every day. I missed you too, she admitted. Even when I was still so angry I could hardly breathe with it. We sat like that for a moment, hands connected, the first bridge rebuilt across the chasm between us. Do. Lowenstein, my therapist, she suggested something, Diana said eventually. A kind of ritual, I guess. For Jason, I waited, giving her space to continue. His birthday is next month, January 17th. 5 years since. She didn't need to finish the sentence. 5 years since we lost him. I thought maybe we could go somewhere he loved. The lighthouse at Castle Island. Maybe. Bring Mom. Say some words. Leave some flowers. The suggestion took my breath away. For years, I'd marked Jason's birthday alone. Usually with a solitary visit to his grave, sometimes just a bottle of wine and old photos spread across my living room floor. The thought of acknowledging it together, as a family, was both terrifying and desperately wanted. I'd like that, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I'd like that very much. Diana squeezed my hand, then released it, reaching for her coffee again. Richard wants to come too, if that's okay. He never met Jason, but he feels connected to him, in a way, through me. Of course, he should come, I said immediately. He's family, now. The word hung between us, weighted with meaning. Family. What we were, what we'd lost, what we were tentatively rebuilding. I have something for you, actually, I said, reaching into my bag. I pulled out a small, wrapped package. An early Christmas present, I guess. Gianna took it, her expression curious. She unwrapped it carefully, revealing a small leather-bound journal. Open it, I encouraged. She did, flipping through pages filled with my handwriting stories, memories, anecdotes. What is this? She asked, though I could see understanding dawning in her eyes. It's Jason, I said simply. Everything I remember about him. The time he tried to teach himself to juggle and broke Mom's favorite video. The summer he decided he was going to be a professional skateboarder and ended up with a broken wrist. The way he always saved the marshmallows in his Lucky Charms for last. Diana's fingers traced the words on the pages, her touch reverent. You wrote all this down. I nodded. After the funeral, I started keeping notes. Afraid I'd forget the small things. You know, the way he laughed, how he could never remember to put the cap back on the toothpaste. His terrible taste in music, a watery laugh escaped her. God, it was awful, wasn't it? All that screamo stuff, the worst, I agreed, smiling through my own tears. Remember when he went through that phase where he wore those huge black pants with all the chains? And Mom was convinced he joined a cult? Diana was fully laughing now, the sound rusty but real. He was so offended, I remembered. It's a lifestyle. Mother, not a cult. We dissolved into laughter, drawing curious glances from nearby tables. It felt foreign and familiar all at once. This sharing of memories, this joint remembering of the brother we'd both loved. Thank you for this, Diana said when our laughter subsided, holding the journal close to her chest. I'll add to it, if that's okay. I'm sure there are things I remember that you don't. I'd like that, I said. Maybe we can give it to Mom when we're done. And someday, ... I hesitated, not wanting to presume too much. Someday, Diana prompted. Someday maybe your kids will want to know about their Uncle Jason, I finished softly. Diana's eyes widened slightly, her hand moving unconsciously to her stomach. About that, ... My breath caught. Diana, are you? A smile spread across her face, tentative but radiant. 12 weeks, we were going to announce it at Christmas, but she shrugged. You're the first person I'm telling. Besides Richard, joy, pure and uncomplicated, surged through me. Oh my God, That's amazing. Impulsively, I stood and moved around the table, pulling her into a hug, our first in years. She stiffened momentarily, then relaxed into it, her arms coming around me. I'm so happy for you, I whispered against her hair, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo still, the same brand after all these years. When we pulled apart, both wiping at tears, I returned to my seat. Boy or girl, do you know yet? She shook her head. Too early. She bit her lip. If it's a boy, we're thinking of naming him Jason. The simple statement undid me completely. I covered my mouth with my hand, unable to speak through the emotion closing my throat. Is that okay? She asked, suddenly uncertain. I mean, I know he was your brother too, and I don't want to. It's perfect, I managed to say. It's absolutely perfect. Outside, snow was falling more heavily now, coating the street in a pristine white blanket. Inside, wrapped in the warmth of reconciliation, my sister and I began the slow, careful work of reweaving the bonds that grief had torn apart. You know, Diana said after a while, I've been thinking a lot about something Father Thomas said at the wedding, about how love breaks and mends and breaks again. I remember, I said. I think maybe that's true of us, a family. We break each other, sometimes without meaning to, and then we have to decide whether to mend what's broken or just ... leave it shattered. I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. I'm glad we're choosing to mend it. Diana reached across the table, taking my hand again. Me too? As we sat there, joined by touch and shared memories and the promise of a future neither of us had dared to imagine 6 months ago. I thought of Jason not as the empty seat at the table, the voice missing from family gatherings, but as the bridge that had ultimately brought us back together, his life, his love, his loss, all of it woven into the complicated tapestry of our relationship. To Jason, I said softly, raising my coffee mug in a small toast. Diana raised hers to meet it. To Jason, she echoed, and 2 sisters. 2 sisters, I agreed, who find their way back to each other, even through the darkest woods. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the city in a gentle blanket of white. A clean slate, a new beginning. Inside, 2 sisters who had once thought themselves irreparably broken began the sacred work of becoming whole again, not despite their scars, but with them honoring the pain that had shaped them and the love that had ultimately saved them. Not an ending, but a beginning. Not forgetting, but remembering together. Not perfect, but real, and in its imperfection, in its messy ends and complexity, infinitely more precious than any fairy tale resolution could ever be. As we left the coffee shop that evening, walking side by side through the snowy streets, I felt Jason's presence between us, not as a ghost or a memory, but as a connection, a reminder of what we'd lost and what we'd found again. His wallet was still in my purse, his photographs still in my living room, his absence still an ache in my heart. But now, for the first time in 5 years, that ache was tempered by something else. Hope, family, sister, home.